This is my InDesign workspace. I'm in the typography workspace. I've moved some things around. If I reset that, it'll go back to the default setup for the typography workspace. I like to move things around a bit or possibly add some other things. I'm going to slide this over so I have a little more room. I like to tear off my tool panel and click on the double arrows and make it 2 columns so I can move it where I need it. It's shorter and it's easier for me to find the things I'm looking for. The first thing I like to do is add a picture into here so you can see how you work with different elements. There's a couple of ways to do this. I could drag a frame, and the big X means that it's an image frame. I'll tell you a funny thing about that though. I can right click on this where it says content. I can change this to text, and then it's a text frame. Up here is my control panel for text. Since I'm in a text tool, I could change the font. I have no particular preference right at the moment. I can change the type size in points. I can change the leading also in points. This is Roman all small cap, another version of that. Let me see what else I've got here. Just try some Garamond here. Make that 100 point so you can see clearly that that's text without me having to zoom in on it. So there's some text. If I have a text frame and I'd rather put a picture in it, I can right click, change the content to graphic or unassigned. Let's say unassigned, and then Command D, drop in or place, put a picture in there. See, that picture is bigger than the frame I made, but I can adjust that a couple of ways. I could drag the frame out until I can find the corners. That seems like a lot of work. If I have an object selected, my control panel at the top will be object related. And you can see on the right side of the control panel, I can choose center the image in the frame. I can choose fit the content to the frame. If I have a frame that's too large, and I'll put some black in there so you can tell where the frame is, I can center the content in the frame and I can fit the frame to the content. If I have a square frame, I could fit it to the height or to the width. And this is fit to the width. If I want to move objects, I use the main selection tool or the object selection tool. If I want to move content, I can use the direct select tool and move things around. I also have a hotspot right here where I can grab this even when I'm in the main selection tool. And just Command Z back to where that fit nicely there. With the direct select tool, I could grab an anchor point and change the shape of the frame. Incidentally, I didn't have Command plus. I'm going to zoom in on this. I didn't have time to prepare something for Chinese dry brush printing, which was around more than 300 years before Gutenberg invented his system of casting metal movable type and created a printing press for it. But in China, they didn't use printing presses until 1644 when missionaries brought them in. In China, they used a dry brush technique where they laid paper on top of an ink surface and then patted it. In this case, he's using some sort of a little bag. It might be a bag of sand or something. Gently apply pressure, or they'd use a dry brush and brush across the back to transfer the ink. That's not what we think of as printing in the West. We think of printing as something using a press to, under pressure, press the ink onto the paper, transfer it. This obviously is not a way that you would want to print, like, say, 100,000 books or 20,000 posters or 500,000 labels for a can of beans. This is nice as an art technique, but it's not productive for large-scale printing. Getting back to InDesign, there's my text frame, and there's an image frame. And if I take the text out, Command A, select all, hit the delete key and take the text out, it's a text frame. But if let's say I just copy this, I'm going to select this, Command C, copy, and in here, and Command Option V, paste it into there. So that was a type frame. I took the type out. I can put a picture in there. It becomes an image frame. If I take this image out of here and take my type tool and just click here and start typing, you can see that I can turn that into a type frame. So type frames and image frames. I might want some additional windows here. Like I might need, if I knew I was doing this for commercial printing and I had images I need to check and see if certain things were right about them, or I'm doing lots of overlaps of color and objects, I might need my output palettes, attributes, flattening, pre-flight, separation preview, trap presets, but we won't need those right now. That might be something for a more advanced class because we're not actually going to commercially print anything here. And I think I'll, in my text frame to match my content, when I have my type control panel, you can see typeface, style, size, lead. I accidentally hit this, all caps. So let's make it all caps. I can make it caps and small caps. I can make it superscript or subscript. I can add an underscore or a strike through. And generally, I probably don't want to do any of those right now. My default kerning is metrics. This is 0 kern. And you see that looks pretty bad. Metrics is better. Display composition, optics is better still. Tracking, I can leave it alone. I could track it positive. I could track it. This is generally referred to as letter spacing. Both tightening and loosening the type are forms of letter spacing. They are forms of tracking, but loose tracking is usually referred to as letter spacing. So I'm going to letter space these out. Frederick William Goudy, the Dean of American Type Designers in the first half of the 20th century, designed over 100 fonts, once said, or is reputed to have said, anyone who would letter space lowercase would steal sheep. So generally we don't letter space lowercase, but we might track it tighter. We track it too tight. Sometimes aesthetically, you don't mind that the type runs into the other letters. That's not uncommon in logos, a little unusual in, say, headlines to be that tight. You can distort the type horizontally or vertically, usually a bad idea. You can do baseline shifts. You can slant the type. You might have some artistic reason for doing that occasionally, but to electronically slant a set of typefaces usually looks pretty bad because what you expect would be an italic. If you don't have a true italic, sometimes you can electronically slant things and it doesn't look too bad, but it's usually a form of distortion that is noticeable if it's done to extreme. And extreme for type would be anything over 10 degrees, maybe 11 degrees at the most. 11 degrees is kind of an average italic angle. But to me, that just looks wrong. One thing that happens is that in the shoulder of the P here, you see that it tends to look fatter than it normally should. Okay, so that's a bit about navigation. I'd like to show you a little bit about type in InDesign. Now, this is really pixelated looking and doesn't look too good. And that's because the display performance is set to typical display, which means that I'm showing this as low resolution. Overprint preview. There you go. Overprint preview. This is the actual image. This is what the image looks like. What's happening in here is that what we see on the screen is what in the old days of paste up before we had computers would be a 4-position only image where we would paste in place something to represent what size and position the picture is supposed to be, any crops on our layout board. That's photographed by the graphic arts camera person. And then when he gets the actual separations for the image, he matches the size and position when he's burning the printing plates. This is the same thing here, where this is a representation of the art. It's not the art. It's a linked file. For this, I need to go back to Window and find links. And you can see that the name of this file is sort JPEG. Sort is what a piece of type was called in the old days. So this is a representation of an actual sort of cast metal type, and it shows the different parts. This is the point body, the point size of the type, which is larger than the capital height. So this tells me what it is and how big it is and what resolution it is and what resolution I'm actually using it at, which is fairly low because this is a very small file. And if I needed to find that, I could reveal an Explorer. It would show me in Finder on a Mac or in my File Explorer on a Windows system. And you can see here it is, sort. So if I needed to find where the actual file is, that would help me find that. I'm going to close that. If it wasn't there, it would give me a little warning sign. It's missing. There'd be a red spot with a white question mark in it. I changed the name of that file in its file location, and now you see that it doesn't know where it is because it has a different name. I'm going to relink that. See, quick access perhaps. There we go. And now that I've updated it, it's okay. I resampled the image to a different size in Photoshop. So it still shows, but it says that something changed about the file. That's what this warning sign means. So I can right click on this, just say update, and now it knows where it is. I have another version of it This is actually a different size now. This is a duplicate at a higher resolution. If I want to change back to the other one that's at the lower resolution, I can click on that one, and now it's back to the original image. So that's a bit about image handling and finding where your images are. If you have lots of images and you want to know, are they linked? You check here. If you need to find one of them, its original file to edit it, you can right click and find it in Explorer or Finder. Let's talk about M spaces and M quads and send it to the back. Actually, I have a layer palette. I could just add another layer to that. And I can put this layer below that layer, or this one above that one. There you go. And I could drag the selected object to that lower layer. And I'll just turn that layer off because I don't need it anymore. Okay, I have here a square that is 41 picas by 8 points wide and tall. This is actually 500 points. If I type in here 500 PT, that's what size it is, 41 P8. If I type 500 without a PT, it'll actually read that as 500 picas, and then I will get a square that is about 83 inches wide. So you have to pay attention to what that P means. Anything to the left of the P is picas. Anything to the right of the P is points. 12 points to the pica, 6 picas to the inch. Computer picas and computer inches. 100 years ago, picas and points were slightly different. So I have a 500 point square. I have type here that is 500 point type. Notice where my type frame is. And actually, I'm going to put a stroke on my type frame so you can see where the type frame is. And actually, because that stroke goes inside and outside the actual path, in my line palette here, I'm going to set that to the outside so that it doesn't affect my type positioning. And that should mean that if I select these two, and on my align palette, oh, I don't have my align palette. Let's go to Window and Objects and Layout, Align, and making sure that I'm aligning to each other and not to the page. I'm going to top align these. It does align to the stroke, and I'll center align these. I can also align to the page. I could do align to page and then center them so I know I'm centered on the page. So we talked about M spaces, and does the M space or the M quad, is that the same size as a capital M? Well, this is a 500 point square, and this is a 500 point capital M. Are those the same size? No. And you can see that there is space above it. The capital doesn't go actually to the top of its body. So if I had an accented letter, like I have an E, well, I want an E with an accent like this one over here. And I don't remember how to do that, but every character in a font, every glyph in a font is available in the glyphs palette. And this is set for punctuation right now because there's a lot of symbols to choose from. So I'll say alternates for selection. I don't seem to have any alternates. Entire font, I'm looking for an E with an accent on it. There's one right there. Let's say I take this one. Okay, and you can see that the accent actually extends above the type body. I can adjust how the type fits into a type frame with Command B text frame options. I can do a lot of things in text frame options. I can set insets on the top, bottom, left, or right, or I can set them all the same by clicking on that. You can see there's a guideline for the inset. Command B text frame options. Baseline options. You can see that this is based on ascent, meaning that from the top of the imaginary type body to the baseline, the area including above the room for the accent, which actually extends outside the type frame. Digitally it does, it wouldn't on metal type. That's ascent. If I want to make sure that the cap lines up to the top of that, I can select the cap height. If I had lowercase letters, I set this for X height, then the type would be aligned by its X height to the top of the frame. I'll show you something peculiar about digital types. I'll snap that to there. This is a Futura Heavy capital M. Command B text frame options. My baseline options, first line baseline offset is by ascent. So it's putting my baseline down here. Command B, text frame options. My baseline option, first baseline, is positioned based on ascent. You can see I have a guideline here. That's where my baseline would be. If I change that to cap height, and actually on this particular font, the caps are a little higher than their cap line, but that's where it aligns to. Again, if I had a lowercase letter here, Command B, text frame options, if I wanted that centered vertically, I could do vertical justification, center, and my text frame is a little long. Bring this up to here. It's the same size as my 500 by 500 point square. Command B, text frame options. If I am using center alignment vertically and my baseline is ascent, it actually looks like it's lower than center because it's positioning based on something that's actually above the cap height. Let's go back to here, top align this. You can see that I've got a gap there above the cap line, and the center actually pokes out a little bit. And if I change the baseline option to X height, then when I select align center, I'm getting more of a visual centering. If I draw a rectangle here and go down to the X height, and then compare that to the space from the bottom of my text frame to the baseline of dog, you can see that that's even spacing. Whereas if I Command B, text frame options, do the baseline as cap height, it's no longer centering. The visual weight of the type is right here and here. Now this is Helvetica, and Command B, text frame options. This is Helvetica LT standard, I believe. Let me just check that. This is not Helvetica Neue, which I like to use Helvetica Neue, but I sometimes use Helvetica standard. Command T gets my character palette. Helvetica LT standard, LT for linotype. This is a linotype owned font. Again, 500 points. And Command B, text frame options. These newer fonts, baseline options, digitally, they don't care so much about ascent anymore, because if I set this for cap height or ascent, it positions exactly the same. So you may not notice that difference with all fonts or in all sizes. I'm not sure if that works the same as small text sizes. Let's find out. Let's make this 12-point type and get a closer look at that. So that's ascent, Command B, text frame options, baseline options, cap height. Yeah, either way with some of the newer linotype fonts, ascent doesn't work the way it does on other fonts. Let's try Adobe Garamond. Command B, text frame options, and here baseline options, that's ascent. This is cap height. So it depends on the font. This is going to vary from font to font.